Hey there, and welcome back to Alaska's Political Pipeline. I'm political reporter Wil Courtney, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about August. That's when I got the chance to speak with former Senate Minority Leader Tom Begich, now current gubernatorial candidate Tom Begich, one of the only two Democrats in this race currently. We're up to 14 now, 14 candidates or people running for office right now to succeed Governor Mike Dunleavy, who is term limited and will be out of office come January. But there's going to be a lot of elections, of course, before that, those primaries, the top four primaries, and then the ultimate election in November, right? So we're going to take you back to this conversation I had in August. But before we go into that, again, of course, August, right? There's been a lot of changes since then, and I want to kind of catch you up to speed on what has changed. I mentioned just a moment ago, Tom Begich, not the only Democrat in the race right now. When we got this chance to speak with him, you'll probably hear it actually in my first question. He is the only Democrat in the race at that point. Now, he's the second, right? Matt Claman, Senator Matt Claman in the state Senate, is the other candidate right now who has announced that he's going to be running for this seat as well. There have been other state lawmakers who have been involved in this race. You have State Senator Shelley Hughes. She actually stepped away from office. So now former State Senator Shelley Hughes, she's announced a gubernatorial campaign. She's running for office. But then you also have, not running for governor necessarily, but for lieutenant governor. You have former Senate Minority Leader as well, different party than Senator Tom Begich, but former Senate Minority Leader Mike Shower. He is the lieutenant governor pick for Bernadette Wilson, both stepping away from their seats to dedicate their time to the campaign trail. So that's where we have these lawmakers currently, these now mostly current lawmakers, former lawmakers, Senator Matt Claman, the only exception there, who are running to get higher office, to join the executive branch. Obviously, only one is going to be the ultimate winner of this race. And then you also have, and you'll actually hear it in this conversation pretty in depth, Mary Peltola, this unknown variable. We operate under the narratives that lawmakers and former lawmakers tell us, right? And the narrative that we've actually been running on since August largely stems from this conversation with former Senate Minority Leader Tom Begich, who actually said he's got a chance to speak with Mary Peltola about his race, because she's been an unknown variable. Is she going to run for governor? Is she going to run for Senate, the House? We don't really quite know yet. She hasn't signaled anything publicly. However, when we got the chance to speak with former Senate Minority Leader Tom Begich, again, he actually said that he expects her to run for the Senate against Senator Dan Sullivan, who is up for election. So still wild card, Mary Peltola. You have, I mentioned at the top 14 different candidates. Let's go into those different candidates right now. You have former state senator, you're going to hear a lot of formers here, but former state senator Click Bishop, former revenue commissioner Adam Crum, former attorney general Treg Taylor, like I said, a lot of formers. Lieutenant Governor Nancy Dahlstrom, Mat-Su Borough Mayor Edna DeVries, Anchorage podiatrist Matt Halila, mining industry worker James Parkin, former state Senate Minority Leader Tom Begich, of course, I just mentioned just a moment ago, former Mat-Su Borough Planning Commissioner Roger Bruce Walden, and you also have businesswoman Bernadette Wilson, you have former state Senator Shelley Hughes, and then former Anchorage Mayor Dave Bronson. So, like I said, a lot of formers. I did leave out one, actually. There's one additional. You have Republican author Henry Hank Kroll. Those are all the people in total, 14, right, including Senator Matt Claman. I actually left him out of that. Current state Senator Matt Claman are all running for governor. A big, big list. At the time of this conversation that you're about to hear, there was 8. So it's risen by 6 until that point. So without further ado, let's just hop into this conversation with former state Senate Minority Leader Tom Begich. The circumstances that bring us today are quite interesting. You are the first Democrat to run to succeed Governor Mike Dunleavy. My first question for you is, why now?
Why now? Why in the month of August, or why at this time?
Why at this time, especially with how many Republicans are in this race right now?
Well, one thing I've observed to a lot of people is that the state is in a place of stagnation right now. It really isn't moving forward, and part of that is about not a willingness. There's a willingness to move forward, but there's also a lack of communication. And part of that communication is what I brought to the state Senate when I served as minority leader. The ability for two sides to talk with each other as opposed to at each other. I think that's really important. And what I think that I bring to the table now is a willingness to listen to others, to learn from what they're saying, and then hopefully lead as a result of that in a much better way. That's why I think it's important for me to be in this race. And why now is because I'm only hearing one side of the discussion and one side of the equation. And there are more than one side in this state. There are a number of different points of view and perspectives. And my skill set is to bring those perspectives together, and I'd like to do that.
And is that one side you're referring to, is that just in this race in particular, or are you bringing that to the legislature or the governor? Or?
One side in this race in particular, right now you have 8 candidates from one political party. Now you have a candidate from the other political party. But what if we take all these different ideas that people are putting on the table and we find ways to synthesize them, make them more palatable to Alaskans so Alaskans believe they're being listened to by everyone? You can't build a good state, a sustainable state, if you don't put good ideas out there. You can't do it if you don't listen to what the people of this state have for their ideas of how to move forward. Those are the things that matter to me.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about your thoughts on the state of the race right now. We are, a year and a half away from November?
Yeah, a year and a half away from November. Very, very flexible right now. Alaskans have a notorious independence streak. They really don't like being told what to do. This is something that, as a born and bred Alaskan, I can tell you is true for me as well. Don't tell me how I'm supposed to be. Let me tell you what I'd like the world to look like. So for us, it's a matter of really listening to the people that are out there and saying, okay, what is this going to look like in the end? A year and a half from now, in a ranked choice election, if we're doing it right, all of the candidates, and I know a lot of those candidates personally, and some of them are friends of mine, but if we're doing it right, we're building a dialogue that engages Alaskans in that conversation, not telling them what to do, but asking them how we should do it better. That is the difference.
What are your thoughts on ranked choice voting?
I love ranked choice voting. You know why? Because it gives you the chance to express your most heartfelt opinion for the first candidate you choose, but it also allows you a second shot at picking somebody who might bring consensus. One thing it does do is it means that people in a ranked choice race have to talk about each other in ways that are respectful, because if you don't get people to listen to you and to expect you to be a reasonable person, they're never going to pick you as a second or a third choice. And I'm comfortable being everyone's first choice, but if I can't be your first choice, consider me for your second choice. And that, to me, is part of how we build consensus.
And I want to ask you kind of about those choices. With being the 9th member of this race, with being the first Democrat, why have there not been other Democrats who have been stepping into the fold?
Oh, well, part of the reason is that our Congresswoman, or now not Congresswoman, our former Congresswoman, Mary Peltola, had expressed interest in the race as well. She still has expressed interest in the race. And we have all of us have a lot of respect for her. She is a longtime friend of mine. I've known her for over 20 years, and I certainly have always supported her in her efforts for public office. And I think all of us were, waiting to see what her next decision would be. She hasn't made that decision yet. But I've had a number of conversations with her. She was encouraging when I said I would be filing a letter of intent. She was supportive of that. And it doesn't mean she won't get in the race. If she does, I would certainly support her. But if she doesn't get in the race, we need to have a Democratic voice out there now. And it's my plan to be governor of the state of Alaska.
How does your voice differ from other candidates right now?
Well, I think part of it is what I've already said, which is, the difference between me and those other candidates is I have a record of actually working with other people to build solutions that actually make a difference for the state. For example, taking the READS Act, working with a governor who I stood opposed to on so many things, but finding a path together with him and Commissioner Michael Johnson to build what is the most successful education reform in over 30 years. We're actually seeing results now at the local level throughout Alaska for first, second, and third graders, where their reading comprehension is going up from when they first come into school to when they leave, significantly higher than the predictions that we even had. Part of that was based on us funding that bill, and that bill's funding is at risk now. The other part of that bill, though, that hasn't been actualized is the fact that we put universal voluntary pre-K. We rolled it in over 5 years. That's an achievement that we've been fighting for over 40 years in this state. Now it's in legislation, but it isn't being funded. So you see, I'm talking about education issues that need to be fully funded, and I'm not hearing other candidates talk about that. The second thing is that these all the other candidates running have had opportunities to, in majorities, if they've been serving or if they haven't been in their party, to actually come up with a sustainable fiscal plan for the state of Alaska, and they haven't done it. Part of that isn't because they didn't want to, it's because you've got to have somebody who can bring people to the table and take that conversation to the next level. That's the skill I have. I've spent 3 decades working on facilitation, mediation, strategic planning, not just in Alaska, not just in over 50 villages and different locations in the state of Alaska, but also all across the country. And part of that skill set means I'll go into a community or go into a town and I'll listen to the people that are having their conflict or having their situation, listening to them and then identifying the common denominators, not the uncommon ones, the things that they share, not the things that divide them. And then building on the sharing of those ideas, you actually build consensus, and that's how you get good policy. Not compromised policy that makes a piece of a good idea weaker, but the kind of policy that actually elevates the conversation and gets things done.
Yeah. Let's talk about education a little bit. You mentioned
Sure.
it just there for a second. This has been one of the forefront issues, especially since I've been here over the last 3 months, primarily from the line item veto of $51 million
Yes.
in the BSA. I'm curious on your thoughts of that, but also maybe that strategy of legislation that prompted that whole situation was created by the governor, right? I'm curious what your thoughts on that type of governorship is.
Well, for me, the position of governor should be about reaching out to the legislature and developing that consensus early instead of looking for reasons or options or opportunities to oppose each other. Sometimes, we create political theater in this state. We stop listening to Alaskans and we spend all our time listening to each other in our little political world, and it's such a closed world that we end up developing animosities and anger at each other, and then that leads to bad policy. In this particular instance, there were numerous attempts, and frankly, early on, also by the governor, to try to build consensus. But at a certain point, that broke down. So why did it break down? It broke down because communication was poor between the legislature and the governor. And there would be numerous members of the legislature who will tell you that. There would be members of the governor's staff who will tell you that. But both had different reasons for why it was happening. I know because I was involved on both sides talking to those folks during that whole discussion. And what I saw happening was unavoidable. You had people that decided to stake out political positions as opposed to actually looking at the importance of the public policy. So that's one of the reasons it broke down. As a governor, I wouldn't approach it that way. My approach would be the same approach I brought to being minority leader. I never once felt that I had to be violent or angry with my members of the majority in the Senate. Instead, I'd reach out to them and identify where we disagreed. There's no point in fighting over a disagreement you can't change a person's mind on. But then finding the way to work with Senator Giesel when she was president of the Senate, or Senator Michicki when he was president of the Senate, identifying where our priorities meshed, led us to consensus. And that consensus led to budgets that barely got a veto from the governor, were supported by cross-party groups, and that actually moved Alaska forward. We expanded food bank. We actually created housing for public health, teachers, and troopers that across the state of Alaska. We actually expanded from the 2 million annually we were doing up to 10 million, over 10 million. We actually worked on things here in town, all the way from addressing homelessness to actually getting a library downtown again. These things came from actually working with other people. It was the extension of the Long Trail. It was building things that enhanced the quality of life in Alaska. But that took dialogue, and it actually took hard work. And it took saying, I may not like you because of your politics, but I can like you as a human being, so why don't we start from that point and figure out what we can do together? And that is a hard thing for people to do, whether you're in your neighborhood, at home, sometimes even in your family. But that's important to do, because if you can't talk with each other, you can't get anything done.
Yeah, and then a little bit back to education. The governor frequently says that we are ranked the lowest or the worst in education in this state. He believes the solution is policy, and that kind of led to the whole line item veto cut of funding. Members of the majority believe that funding is a key part of making sure we get the results that we see. I'm curious what your thoughts are. Do you think the answer is policy, or do you think the answer is funding?
I think the answer is both, and it has been. We passed a policy bill in 2022, which was, as I mentioned earlier, the READS Act. The READS Act was policy, but it was backed up by funding. And the unique coincidence of federal money coming in at the same time ensured that the funding was sufficient for school districts to fully enact the reform. You have to have both. But listen, when people say to you that the school districts are spending money unwisely, think about this. If you don't actually know what your budget is when you're getting to that point of the end of the fiscal year, you don't know what your budget is, you can't hire teachers, and you're spending down your reserves, that is forcing school districts to make bad economic choices. And they do so because they're at the end of the budget cycle, not the beginning. If you don't give a planning horizon to a school district to plan, you can't expect them to plan well. So that expectation is built on ensuring that funding is stable and predictable for school districts. That is not the way we budget for schools now. We should be doing three things. The first thing we should be doing is we should do forward funding of education. It should be forward funded so districts have stability and the understanding of what their budget amounts are going to be. We should provide stability for teachers, ensuring they have a defined pension plan. So instead of waiting 5 years, cashing out their 401ks and moving, they actually have a reason and a stake in Alaska. These are two very, very simple solutions for it. But the third thing we should be doing is ensuring that we are supporting them as they develop their policies. You want to measure their success, then the Department of Education and Early Development has a constitutional responsibility to support those districts. But that means you have to fund your Department of Education and Early Development so they can provide that resource. If you do these three things, these are all things that deal with infrastructure of school districts, you're going to see responsible planning from school districts, not desperation planning, and you're going to actually see these districts improve how they function. If you do that, you're going to see those, along with good policy around reading, expanding the READS Act up all the way to 8th grade, which you could do, but you're going to have to fund it if you do that. You can't just say, here's the policy, make it so. It doesn't work that way. You have to say, here's the policy, and we recognize that that policy is going to require you to bring people on to implement it. And so here is the resource to fund that. And then the governor and the legislature both will say to you, there are no resources. And that is simply not true. The resources are there. For example, we had what would have been internet capture bill. That bill would have captured from international internet companies what 30 plus states are already doing. They're putting a minimal tax. That doesn't affect you or me, but that does affect those multinational companies. That tax would have brought in between $30 and $40 million. That's the first step. Now, how much did the governor veto? $50 million. So let's talk about, and the governor vetoed that bill. That bill should have been approved. The legislature saw it as a good idea. Second thing is, we have allowed major oil companies to sell their assets that were paying corporate taxes to the state of Alaska, because we don't have income tax here on us, but we do have a corporate tax. They're selling their assets to companies that aren't liable to that tax, so they're taking that asset off the tax rolls. So far, we're losing about $150 million a year from what is called the S-corp loophole. Senator Yunt, a Republican from Matsu, understood that that was an unfair burden on the companies that pay a corporate tax. And he sponsored a bill that would have closed that loophole for those large companies. The S-corp was designed to help small businesses develop. But if you use it with large companies, what you're ending up doing is you're taking away Alaska's future. That would have added another $150 million to our budget. Now you're 3 times the veto there, plus the $40 million. Last thing, carbon capture, carbon sequestration. These are 2 bills the governor wanted and the legislature gave him. Consensus, working together. I was involved with some of those discussions to help that happen. The governor thought that would bring in about $800 million a year. The legislature thought it would bring in between $100 and $200 million a year. Regardless of who was right, that's additional resource on top of the resource I've already identified. Both those bills passed. The Department of Natural Resources has prepped both those bills, but we haven't enacted them. We haven't actually sent them out for contract. And that, to me, is confusing. As governor, I would enact those bills and make sure that whether the President of the United States supports that or not is irrelevant. There are companies all over the world that support using those kinds of concepts. They would pay us to not develop our resources, but pay us to maintain those resources for carbon credits.
How would you rate Governor Dunleavy's term in office?
Well, that's a difficult question, because if it wasn't for the READS Act, we wouldn't see improvements in education. He and I have had our good days and we have had our bad days. We get along relatively well. I would say that you're asking for a letter grade, or are you asking for whether I just give you a general idea of it?
Yeah, I can quantify a letter grade.
I'm going to go differently, though. I'm going to push back. I'm going to say, you know what, I think we could do better. I think the governor would admit that when it comes to dialogue, it hasn't always been smooth with the legislature. I can do a better job of that, and I know I can. And I think he does too. And when it comes to the issue of public policy, I think I have a better approach than the governor does to how we move the state forward comprehensively. Yeah. And so I think, all in all, we could do better.
Tell me a little bit about those conversations you've had with former Representative Peltola.
Well, what those conversations have been about is I've asked her what her interest is. I know she is interested in serving the state of Alaska. She's deeply, deeply committed to public service in Alaska. It's one of the reasons I've supported her, and not just when she was in the State House, but also when she has run for U.S. House. And I will continue to support her if she chooses to run for a statewide office, regardless of what that office is. She is committed to the state, and those conversations have been about that. I've met with her, I've met with her team, and we are in, I would just say, we are in agreement that this state's future is in the balance. And we're at a place now, if we don't build that sustainable plan and have federal support in the efforts that we're working for, there is no way to move this state forward. I know she understands the federal obligations that we need to have implemented for this state. I know she understands the federal environment significantly better than I do. And I know she understands that there is a level of commitment to that process, to that federal position that is important for Alaska. And she knows she's in the best position to secure that.
What happens to your campaign if she runs?
If she runs for which office?
For governor.
For governor. Yeah. If Mary Peltola were to run for governor, I would respectfully support her.
But you would stay in the race, though?
No. I would stay out. I would take myself out of the race and support her. I'm not going to run against Mary Peltola, and Mary Peltola is not going to run against me. And that's our understanding, and I'm committed to that. You know, I don't break my word, and I haven't broken my word in all the time that I worked in the Senate. I worked with people directly. I worked with them because they could trust me and the policies I put forward. Mary Peltola sees that in me as well, and I appreciate that about her, and I see it in her. And so together, if we're both on that ticket, she is a candidate for a federal office, and me as a candidate for a state office, it's a team that can't be beat. If she chooses to be in this position and to run for governor, then I'm going to be supporting her. As I said to her once, I'll be either beside you, working with you, side by side, when it comes to you for the U.S. Senate, say, or me for the governorship, or I'll be working, supporting you, walking right behind you to help you get over the line for governor. Both of those are true.
And I think there's a good question of, I guess, your seriousness of this campaign. If you're already saying, a year and a half out that, if this person comes in, they are a better candidate than me, I'll just throw my cards in and fold. Are you a serious candidate for this position?
I'm a very serious candidate, Will. And in a way, I kind of don't like the question because of the way you put it. Let me just be blunt with you. I don't break my word to anybody. And I made a commitment and a promise that I'm not going to break. People take ambition to a level that doesn't make sense to me. They're so ambitious that they'll throw their own mothers under the bus. Not me. I told her if she chooses to run, she is the highest vote getter a Democrat has had here in over 3 decades. And when you think about that, and you think about your principles, there's an importance to ensuring that the principles are reflected in whatever office a person runs for. Do I think I'd be a good governor? I know I would be. Do I think that I'm going to be the governor of the state of Alaska? I believe I will be. Will I break my word to get there? Absolutely not.
Are there other candidates that you would lead the race for?
Not a one.
No.
There is no one else I would.
So I guess what is it about Peltola that leads you to, not only put yourself in the race, but also be willing to put yourself out? Is it something about her character? Is it something about her leadership?
Well, it's absolutely about her character. She's a truth teller. She is a person who I have trusted my entire working life, legislative working life. She is a person that I've known for over 20 years to keep her word, to stick with the people she believes in, and to fight for causes I fight for. I think that she's kind. And Alaska doesn't have enough kindness in our politics. We have a mean streak. She doesn't have that mean streak. She inspires young people to a higher place. I think that's important. I think I do too. And I think that's important as well. That's why we get along. That's why we have a trust relationship. If I don't break the trust, I'm not gonna. But do I believe she'll run for governor? I don't think she's going to run for governor. I think she's going to run for the United States Senate, and I hope she does. Yeah. But if she does choose governor, I'm not going to break my commitment.
Absolutely. And then I want to ask one more question about your bid. You have, I believe, 5 or 6 different items on your website about the specific policies that you want to shoot for. That's strong schools, opportunity for every young person, building bridges, not walls, culture of creativity and innovation, and thriving communities.
And more details coming on all those things.
Okay.
So yeah, that's the first page of a website.
Sure.
But,
well, and I'm looking forward to seeing more about that. But I guess let's just start, and this is my last question. You've been very generous with your time. Why those items? Why were those the items you selected in your announcement bid?
Well, to start with education, I've already talked about.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can't learn to read, you can't learn to do anything. And so from my perspective, if you don't have a strong education system, you're setting your children up for failure. And to me, that's the first step. If you don't preserve the cultures that make Alaska great, then you have absolutely no way to ensure that kids, when they go to school, have a sense of place and a sense of being. And if you're not coming up with innovative ideas that actually move Alaska forward, like we did in the 70s when telecommunication was our baby, we did in the 80s when we developed the oil industry up here. Now we need to be looking at how we develop alternative energy or other innovations that emerge from Alaska. We're the best testing ground in the world for any new technology. So innovating up here also attracts young people here or keeps them here. If we're actually cutting edge, doing the things that we're supposed to be doing, then that matters. When it comes to economic development, you cannot develop the economy of the state of Alaska unless you have a stable fiscal environment. So that's why that's on there. And economy isn't just measured by the number of large companies you bring here, it's how you develop economy at the local level. People talk about homelessness all the time. You want to address homelessness? Then find a way to ensure that rural economies are also strong, not just focusing on the Anchorage economy. This is a service community. There's a union just down the road from you here that makes its money because the government and the government invests in rural areas, and this city builds those investments. That's what keeps people employed in the state of Alaska. These things are all connected. If you can develop cheap energy for Alaskans at the same time, if you develop less expensive, not just for South Central, for rural Alaska, it makes a difference in terms of our ability to live in a place. Right now, if you want energy in rural Alaska, it costs 3 times what it costs here to heat a home. So if you have no money, it's the most poverty-stricken part of the state, and you literally are paying 3 times for energy, that doesn't make any sense. We innovated a green bank that took both Democrats and Republicans to agree, the governor as well. That green bank would bring private equity and public equity together to help convert communities to inexpensive energy. That has to be done, but I don't see the leadership to get it done. That's some of where I come from and some of what I intend to pursue when it comes to this campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. Mr. Begich, if there's anything else that you'd like to say before we end this interview?
Sure. I'd like to tell you that this is a serious campaign, Will. It's my intent to be governor of the state of Alaska. It's my intent to do that by listening to Alaskans, learning from them, and hoping to lead us to a stable and sustainable future. I don't think there is a better candidate in the race to do that. I think I'm the candidate that can do that.
Absolutely. Mr. Begich, thank you so much for your
Thank you,
time
Will.
today. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for listening to In-Depth Alaska. A thank you to Mr. Begich for taking the time to speak with us. If you liked what you listened to, consider giving us a follow and rate our show. Take care. Thank you for listening to Alaska's Political Pipeline. If you like what you listen to, consider rating our podcast and giving us a follow. We'll be back in your feeds next Monday, but until then, please take care.